Listen carefully, because this is not motivation and this is not encouragement, this is revelation. What you have been waiting for is not delayed, not missing, and not testing you. It is already finished. The moment you understand this, everything changes. Most people live their entire lives believing they are moving towards something, chasing something, hoping something will arrive one day. But the truth is far simpler and far more powerful. Nothing comes to you until you claim it internally as already yours. Right now, whether you can see evidence or not, the decision has already been made in the unseen. The question is not if it will happen. The question is, who are you being while it unfolds? Life does not respond to begging, effort, or repetition. It responds to certainty. And the second certainty enters your awareness, reality has no choice but to rearrange itself around that assumption. This moment is not about asking for more. It is about realizing you were never lacking. The overflow you desire does not appear when you struggle harder. It appears when you stop arguing with the idea that it is already done. When you stop waiting, stop doubting, and stop placing your future ahead of you, something shifts. The chase ends. The resistance collapses. And what was invisible begins to surface. You are not here to learn how to get something. You are here to remember that it has already been released. Stay here. Stay present. Because once this truth lands, you will never listen the same way again. Completion exists before evidence. Nothing in your life begins in the visible world. Every experience, every breakthrough, every overflow starts its journey in a place you cannot see, measure, or prove. This is where most people misunderstand how reality works. They believe evidence must come first, and belief follows later. They think results create confidence, money creates peace, success creates certainty. But the order has always been reversed. Completion exists before evidence. Fulfillment is decided long before it is displayed. The visible world is not the origin, it is the echo. And until you understand this, you will always feel like you are chasing life instead of commanding it. The unseen is not empty space, it is finished space. Everything you desire already exists as a completed state, waiting not for effort, but for recognition. The moment you desire something, it is not being created. It is being revealed to your awareness. Desire itself is proof that completion already exists. You would never hunger for something that had no counterpart. The hunger is the signal that the answer is already formed. The mistake people make is assuming the desire means absence, when in truth it means proximity. Desire is not lack, it is alignment knocking at your attention. Evidence does not create reality. Evidence confirms reality. When you demand proof before you believe, you are asking the mirror to smile first. Life reflects, it does not initiate. The inner decision is the cause, the outer confirmation is the effect. And effects are always delayed compared to causes. That delay is not punishment. It is simply the time required for the echo to travel. The echo cannot arrive before the sound. In the same way, manifestation cannot appear before assumption. The moment you internally accept that something is already complete, the sound has been made. The echo must follow. Most people live in a state of almost confident, almost believing, almost trusting. And almost is the most dangerous place to live because it keeps you leaning forward instead of standing firm. Leaning forward creates tension. Standing firm creates authority. When you live as though completion is future-based, you send a signal of waiting, and waiting produces more waiting. But when you live as though completion is already settled, waiting dissolves. You no longer ask, when will it happen? You ask, how will it reveal itself? And even that question eventually fades, because certainty does not interrogate reality, it rests in it. Completion before evidence is not pretending. It is not imagination used as escape. It is recognition. It is seeing reality from the position of the end instead of the middle. The middle is confusing, noisy, and unstable. The end is calm, quiet, and resolved. When you stand in the end internally, the middle reorganizes itself automatically. You do not need to fix every detail. You do not need to control every step. You only need to remain loyal to the assumption that the outcome is decided. The reason evidence feels so important is because the senses were trained to lead instead of follow. From a young age, people are taught to trust what they see, hear, and touch more than what they know. But the senses are reporters, not leaders. They report past assumptions. They show you where consciousness has already been. When you let the senses dictate your belief, you trap yourself in repetition. You keep recreating the same conditions because you keep agreeing with the same reports. Completion before evidence requires a different loyalty, a loyalty to inner knowing over outer noise. When you accept completion internally, something subtle but powerful happens. Your emotional charge changes. The urgency leaves. The desperation fades. You stop scanning your life for signs. This is not because you no longer care, but because you no longer doubt. Doubt is noisy. Certainty is quiet. And that quietness is not weakness, it is command. Life responds faster to calm authority than to emotional demand. The unseen moves efficiently when it is not interrupted by fear. Evidence always lags behind assumption because evidence belongs to time, while assumption belongs to consciousness. Consciousness is immediate. Time is sequential. When you decide something is done, consciousness accepts it instantly. Time then arranges the sequence necessary for it to appear. That sequence may not look logical. It may even look opposite at first. Things may seem to fall apart before they fall into place. This is not regression. This is reorganization. Completion does not always enter gently, it enters precisely. The mind wants guarantees, it wants reassurance, it wants signs. But the mind is not the creator, it is the observer. The observer must be trained to follow, not to lead. When the mind sees no evidence, it panics. When it panics, it pulls consciousness back into waiting. That is why discipline is required. Not discipline of action, but discipline of assumption. You must repeatedly return to the knowing that the decision has already been made. Not emotionally, not dramatically, but naturally, as if you are remembering something obvious. Completion before evidence also changes how you interpret setbacks. What once felt like failure now feels irrelevant. When you know the end, temporary conditions lose their authority. You stop assigning meaning to every delay. You stop personalizing every obstacle. You stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" because you know the outcome is not in question. Only the process is unfolding, and processes are allowed to be messy. Living from completion does not make you passive, it makes you precise. Action taken from certainty is different from action taken from fear. Fear-driven action is rushed, scattered, and exhausting. Certainty-driven action is calm, focused, and efficient. You move when inspired, not when pressured. And inspiration always comes from the end state, not the lack state. When you know something is done, you act in alignment, not desperation. The greatest shift happens when you stop trying to feel excited and start allowing yourself to feel settled. Excitement seeks confirmation. Settledness assumes it. Overflow flows easiest into a settled state. A settled mind does not block, resist, or overthink. It allows, and allowance is the highest form of power. Completion before evidence also requires letting go of comparison. When you measure your journey against others, you are borrowing their timeline and abandoning your own assumption. Evidence appears differently for everyone, but completion is universal. The form may vary, but the principle does not. Stay loyal to your inner decision. The outer world will catch up. Eventually, you reach a point where you no longer need to repeat affirmations, visualize constantly, or remind yourself. The knowing becomes natural. Effort fades, you simply live. And that is when evidence rushes in, not because you forced it, but because you stopped blocking it. So understand this clearly: what you desire is not becoming. It is already complete. The only question is whether you will live as someone waiting for proof or someone standing in knowing. The moment you choose knowing, evidence becomes inevitable. Overflow is a state, not an event. Most people imagine overflow as a dramatic moment in time, a sudden breakthrough, an unexpected opportunity, a large sum arriving all at once, or a visible turning point that announces, "Now your life has changed." But this belief alone keeps overflow just out of reach. Overflow is not an event that happens to you, it is a state you occupy. And until that state becomes natural within you, no external event can permanently change your circumstances. Events come and go, states remain. When you understand this, you stop waiting for life to shift and begin allowing life to respond. A state is not a mood. It is not excitement or temporary positivity. A state is an identity, a settled inner position from which you think, feel, decide, and interpret the world. When someone lives in the state of lack, every event is filtered through scarcity. Even gain feels fragile. Even success feels temporary. But when someone lives in the state of overflow, even delay feels irrelevant. Even silence feels secure. The difference is not what happens, it is who you are being while it happens. Overflow begins the moment you stop tying abundance to future circumstances. The mind loves milestones. When I get this, then I'll feel safe. When this changes, then I'll relax. But safety and relaxation are not rewards, they are states. And any state you postpone the reflection of. Life mirrors the state you occupy now, not the one you promise yourself later. If you are waiting to feel abundant after something happens, you are unknowingly signaling that abundance is not your current identity. Life simply agrees. A state does not need evidence to exist. In fact, evidence follows states automatically. You do not need permission from the outer world to shift who you are internally. That shift is private, silent, and immediate. The moment you internally decide, I am supported, provided for, and backed by life, something relaxes. Your nervous system calms, your reactions soften. You stop clenching around outcomes. This relaxation is not laziness, it is alignment. Overflow flows where there is space, not tension. When overflow is seen as an event, people chase signs. They monitor timelines, they measure progress. This creates pressure, and pressure creates resistance. Resistance does not stop manifestation, it delays its expression. The unseen moves effortlessly, but it cannot express through a mind that is constantly checking, doubting, and interfering. A state of overflow is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not need validation. It simply assumes continuation. One of the clearest indicators that someone has entered the state of overflow is their relationship with time. They are no longer in a hurry, not because they do not desire, but because they trust the unfolding. Urgency belongs to lack. Patience belongs to knowing. When you know something is yours, you do not rush life. You let it deliver in its own rhythm. And that rhythm always aligns circumstances, people, and opportunities more precisely than force ever could. Overflow as a state also changes how you interpret money, success, and resources. You stop seeing them as things to be chased and start seeing them as responses. Responses to your inner position. Money flows toward those who expect circulation, not hoarding or struggle. Opportunities open for those who assume availability, not competition. The state you live in instructs life how to treat you. Many people fear adopting the state of overflow because they believe it will make them complacent. In truth, it makes them clearer. Action taken from overflow is inspired, not exhausting. You move because it feels right, not because you are afraid of missing out. You say no more easily. You choose better. You stop tolerating what contradicts your state. This is not arrogance, it is congruence. Overflow is also not about excess for the sake of excess. It is about sufficiency that expands naturally. When you feel internally full, you are generous without depletion. You give without fear. You receive without guilt. Guilt is a sign of misalignment, a belief that receiving takes away from someone else. In the state of overflow, you understand that life is not a limited container. What flows to you does not reduce what flows to another. That understanding removes inner conflict, and inner conflict is one of the greatest blockers of abundance. A state once assumed must be maintained, not through force, but through loyalty. Loyalty to your inner position when appearances challenge it. Life will test states not to punish, but to stabilize them. When something contradictory appears, it is asking, are you still who you decided to be? If you react emotionally, you step out of the state. If you remain calm, you reinforce it. Calm is not indifference. It is confidence without noise. Overflow as a state also dissolves the need to control outcomes. Control is a symptom of distrust. When you trust the state, you trust the process. You no longer need to micromanage how things arrive. You allow detours, delays, and surprises. Often, what looks like a setback is actually a redirection toward a larger expression of overflow. But you can only see that from within the state, not from fear. The world trains people to believe identity follows success. But the truth is success follows identity. When you change who you are internally, the world must catch up. Not because it is kind, but because it is lawful. The law is simple: life reflects consciousness, and consciousness operates in states. Once overflow becomes your state, it no longer feels dramatic. It feels normal, and that is when it becomes permanent. What feels extraordinary fades. What feels normal stays. If abundance feels unnatural, it will come and go. If it feels like home, it will remain. So stop waiting for the moment that changes everything. Become the state that changes everything. Overflow is not arriving, it is expressing through you the moment you accept it as who you are. Assumption commands reality. Nothing in your life moves randomly. Every pattern, every repetition, every breakthrough and delay is governed by one silent force: assumption. Not what you wish, not what you hope, not what you fear occasionally, but what you consistently assume to be true. Assumption is not a thought you repeat. It is a position you occupy. It is the atmosphere you live in. And whatever atmosphere you live in becomes the climate of your life. Reality does not argue with assumption. It obeys it. Most people believe action creates results, but action only expresses assumption. Two people can take the same action and receive completely different outcomes because they are operating from different inner positions. One expects resistance and meets it everywhere. The other expects cooperation and finds doors opening without force. The difference is not skill, timing, or luck, it is command. Assumption is command. Life listens to it more carefully than it listens to words. An assumption does not feel dramatic. In fact, the most powerful assumptions feel ordinary. They feel like this is just how things are. That is why people struggle to change their lives by repeating affirmations while secretly assuming the opposite. Repetition without conviction does nothing. Emotion without identity fades. But assumption, once accepted, settles into the subconscious and begins directing perception, behavior, and response automatically. You stop trying to manifest, you start experiencing. Reality organizes itself around what you accept as normal. If struggle feels normal, ease feels suspicious. If lack feels normal, abundance feels temporary. If disappointment feels familiar, success feels unstable. The mind always tries to return to what it knows. That is why changing assumption feels uncomfortable at first. You are not fighting circumstances, you are rewiring familiarity. The discomfort is not resistance from life, it is withdrawal from an old identity. Assumption commands reality because reality has no independent voice. It is a mirror that reflects the most dominant internal agreement. It does not care whether the assumption is positive or negative, true or false, fair or unfair. It simply reflects. That is why blaming circumstances never works. Circumstances are not the cause, they are the echo. Change the echo source and the sound changes automatically. The most dangerous assumptions are the ones you are not aware of, the quiet ones, the ones disguised as just being realistic. These assumptions quietly dictate limits, timelines, and ceilings. This always happens to me. It's hard to make money. Things work out for others, not me. These are not statements, they are commands. And life executes them flawlessly. Not because they are correct, but because they are believed. Assumption does not require force. In fact, force weakens it. The more you try to convince yourself, the less you actually believe. True assumption feels like agreement, not effort. It feels like settling into a chair rather than holding a pose. When an assumption is real, you do not argue with it. You do not defend it. You do not seek evidence for it. You live from it. And life rearranges accordingly. When you change an assumption, you change how you interpret events. The same situation that once triggered fear now triggers curiosity. The same delay that once felt like rejection now feels like alignment. This is not denial, it is command. You are no longer letting appearances decide meaning. You are assigning meaning from the end, and meaning is power. Assumption also governs how others treat you. People do not respond to your words, they respond to your state. They sense expectation, confidence, insecurity, or doubt before you speak. When you assume respect, you behave differently. You tolerate less, you speak clearly. And others adjust without explanation. This is not manipulation, it is alignment. People unconsciously agree with the role you assign yourself. Many people wait for confidence to arrive before assuming success. But confidence is not the cause, it is the result. The cause is assumption. You do not assume because you feel ready. You feel ready because you assume. This reversal is where most people get stuck. They want permission from emotions before taking an inner position. But emotions follow identity, not the other way around. Assumption also removes the obsession with how. The how belongs to the mechanism, not the commander. When you know the end is secured, you stop micromanaging the path. You take steps when inspired and rest when not. You trust impulses instead of forcing plans. And strangely, things begin to line up with less effort. This is not coincidence, it is compliance. Reality loves clarity. Vague assumptions produce vague results. Clear assumptions produce decisive movement. When you are unclear about what you accept, life reflects uncertainty. When you are clear, life accelerates. Clarity does not mean obsession with details, it means certainty of outcome. You may not know the form, but you know the fulfillment. Assumption must be maintained through consistency, not repetition. Repetition can help form assumption, but once formed, maintenance is simply refusal to contradict it. When doubt appears, you do not fight it, you ignore it. Attention feeds states. What you starve dissolves. What you feed grows. Maintain the assumption by living as though it is settled, not by arguing with fear. The most powerful moment in any manifestation is the moment you internally say, "This is decided," not emotionally, not dramatically, quietly. That quiet decision sets everything in motion. You do not need signs after that. Looking for signs implies uncertainty, and uncertainty weakens command. Assumption commands reality because reality is obedient by nature. It has no agenda, it waits for instruction. The instruction is not spoken aloud, it is accepted internally. And once accepted, it must express. There is no delay in the unseen. There is only sequencing in the seen. So if you want to change your life, do not fight conditions. Change what you assume about yourself, your worth, your support, and your outcomes. The moment the assumption shifts, the command is issued. And reality, having no choice, begins to obey. Waiting delays reception. Waiting feels harmless. It feels patient, responsible, even wise. But waiting is one of the most misunderstood states of consciousness, because while it looks calm on the surface, it quietly communicates doubt underneath. Waiting says, "It is not here yet." Waiting says, "Something must still happen before I can have it." And life, being a perfect responder, mirrors that message faithfully. Waiting does not prepare you to receive, it postpones reception. The moment you understand this, you stop placing your life on pause and step into authority. Waiting is not the same as allowing. Allowing is relaxed certainty. Waiting is hopeful uncertainty. Allowing assumes completion. Waiting assumes distance. And whatever you assume becomes your experience. Many people believe they are being patient, but patience that contains expectation of delay is not patience, it is permission for delay. Life does not move faster because you wait well, it moves faster when you stop positioning the outcome in the future. The mind has been trained to believe that good things require time, struggle, or conditions. So when something is desired, the natural habit is to wait for signs, wait for readiness, wait for circumstances to improve. But this habit quietly reinforces separation. You cannot receive what you keep placing ahead of you. Reception only happens in the present. And waiting, by definition, removes fulfillment from the present moment. When you are waiting, your attention is divided. Part of you wants the outcome, but another part is monitoring absence. That monitoring becomes your dominant focus. You check for movement. You scan for progress. You measure time. And every measurement confirms, not yet. Life responds honestly. It gives you more, not yet. This is not punishment. It is accuracy. Reception begins the moment you stop asking, "When will it happen?" and start living as though the answer has already been given. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop postponing identity. You no longer say, "I will feel secure when this arrives." You feel secure now. You no longer say, "I will relax once this changes." You relax now. And relaxation is not surrender, it is command. Tension blocks flow, calm invites it. Waiting also drains energy. It creates emotional fatigue because you are constantly leaning forward mentally. Leaning forward keeps you off balance. When you stop waiting, you stand upright internally. You return to center. From that center, your decisions become clearer, your reactions softer, and your intuition sharper. This inner alignment is what allows things to move quickly and cleanly. Many people fear stopping waiting because they think it means giving up. But giving up is resignation. Stopping waiting is acceptance. Acceptance of completion. Acceptance of support. Acceptance that life is not withholding. When you accept that something is already decided, you stop negotiating with reality. Negotiation implies uncertainty. Authority does not negotiate, it knows. Waiting also creates emotional dependency on outcomes. Your mood rises and falls based on external signs. One positive signal brings hope. One delay brings disappointment. This emotional volatility is exhausting and unnecessary. When you know something is settled, your emotional state stabilizes. You are no longer at the mercy of appearances. And stability is power. The unseen does not respond to impatience or patience. It responds to alignment. Alignment is present moment agreement with fulfillment. When you are aligned, you may still take action, but the action feels different. It is not driven by fear of missing out. It is inspired, timely, and efficient. You move when it feels natural, not when anxiety pushes you. Waiting also keeps you stuck in rehearsal instead of embodiment. You rehearse success. You rehearse happiness. You rehearse confidence, but you do not live them yet. Life does not reward rehearsal, it reflects embodiment. When you embody the state now, the reflection follows. Not because you deserve it, but because you are congruent with it. One of the clearest signs that someone has stopped waiting is their silence. They talk less about what they want. They explain less. They justify less. Not because they are hiding, but because certainty does not need commentary. Waiting is noisy. Knowing is quiet. And that quietness carries authority. Stopping waiting does not mean denying present circumstances. It means refusing to let them define your future. Circumstances are transitional. They are the residue of previous assumptions. Treating them as final only extends them. When you see them as temporary echoes, they lose their grip on your emotions. Emotional detachment does not block manifestation, it accelerates it. Waiting also keeps you tied to timelines that may not serve you. Life often delivers through unexpected routes. When you wait for a specific sequence, you limit the flow. When you trust the outcome without insisting on the road, life finds more efficient paths. Flexibility belongs to knowing. Rigidity belongs to fear. The greatest shift happens when you stop using time as a measuring stick. Time does not determine readiness. Consciousness does. The moment you are internally ready, meaning settled, receptive, and certain, time rearranges itself. What once took months can happen quickly. What once felt blocked suddenly opens. Not because time changed, but because you did. Reception is not something you do. It is something you allow by stepping out of waiting. You receive by being present. You receive by being calm. You receive by being certain. The more natural the state, the faster the expression. So if you feel like things are slow, ask yourself honestly, am I waiting or am I knowing? Am I hoping or am I assuming? Am I postponing fulfillment or am I living from it? The answer to that question determines everything. The moment you stop waiting, reception begins, not later, not eventually, now. You do not chase blessings, you allow them. Chasing has been glorified as effort, ambition, and determination, but beneath its surface, chasing always carries the same hidden message. What I want is not here yet. And life, being exact and responsive, reflects that assumption without question. The moment you chase, you place your desire ahead of you, separate from you, and slightly out of reach. Allowing, on the other hand, carries an entirely different message. Allowing says, this is already mine and I am open to its expression. One state creates exhaustion. The other creates flow. Chasing is driven by fear. Fear of missing out, fear of being left behind, fear that if you stop pushing, nothing will happen. But fear is not fuel, it is friction. It creates urgency, tension, and attachment to outcomes. Allowing dissolves that friction. It replaces urgency with trust, attachment with ease, and effort with alignment. And alignment is what allows blessings to move freely. When you chase, your attention is fixed on absence. You are constantly aware of what you do not yet have. Even progress feels fragile because it can be lost. This awareness of lack becomes the dominant signal you send to life. When you allow, your attention shifts to presence. You live as someone who expects continuation, not interruption. Expectation shapes experience. Allowing does not mean doing nothing. It means acting without resistance. Action taken from allowing feels natural. You are not forcing doors, you are noticing which ones are already open. You are not pushing conversations, you are responding to opportunities. You are not exhausting yourself, you are cooperating with timing. Cooperation is far more powerful than force. Many people believe that if they stop chasing, they will lose momentum. In truth, chasing is what drains momentum. It creates burnout because it requires constant emotional output. Allowing restores energy because it removes inner conflict. When there is no conflict between where you are and where you believe you should be, energy flows smoothly. And where energy flows, results follow. Chasing also creates attachment to specific outcomes. You want it to happen in a certain way, through a certain person, by a certain time. This attachment narrows the channel. Allowing widens it. When you allow, you trust that the form will match the fulfillment. You are not micromanaging how life delivers. You are focused on staying aligned with the state of reception. One of the clearest signs of allowing is ease with uncertainty. Not indifference, but confidence. You do not need to know every step because you know the end. You are comfortable not controlling because you trust the process. Control is the language of fear. Allowing is the language of power. Allowing also changes how you relate to effort. You still put in effort where it feels right, but you no longer overextend to prove worthiness. You do not hustle to deserve. You act because it feels aligned, not because you are afraid of losing opportunity. This distinction changes everything. Effort becomes effective instead of exhausting. When you allow, you stop competing. Competition implies scarcity. Allowing assumes sufficiency. You no longer see others' success as a threat. You see it as confirmation. Confirmation that the flow exists. and what exists for one can express for another. This removes jealousy, comparison, and resentment, emotions that silently block reception. Allowing also dissolves guilt around receiving. Many people subconsciously believe that receiving more means taking from someone else. This belief creates inner resistance. Allowing replaces that belief with understanding life is expansive. When you receive, you expand the channel. You become a point of circulation, not hoarding. And circulation sustains flow. The moment you stop chasing, your nervous system relaxes. This relaxation is not passive, it is magnetic. People respond differently to you. Opportunities approach you. Conversations shift. This is not mystical, it is behavioral and energetic. A relaxed presence communicates confidence. Confidence invites trust. Trust opens doors. Allowing also makes you more selective. When you are not chasing, you do not grab at everything. You wait not in the sense of delay, but in the sense of discernment. You choose what aligns. You let go of what doesn't. This clarity protects your energy and maintains your state. One of the hardest parts of allowing is letting go of the belief that struggle is necessary. Many people equate struggle with value. They believe that if something comes easily, it must not be earned. But ease does not mean lack of effort. It means absence of resistance. And resistance is optional. Life does not reward suffering. It reflects alignment. Allowing requires trust in your inner decision. Once you decide something is yours, your role is not to chase it, but to remain receptive. Receptivity is not passive, it is attentive. You stay aware of impulses, opportunities, and shifts without forcing them. You respond, you do not pursue. Over time, allowing becomes natural. You stop oscillating between hope and doubt. You settle into expectation. And expectation is powerful because it assumes continuity. What you expect to continue continues. The most powerful blessing you can allow is the end of struggle. When struggle ends internally, life stops reflecting it externally. And blessings no longer feel like rare events, they feel like a natural extension of who you are. So stop running, stop proving, stop forcing. Stand still internally, open space. Let life meet you where you are. You were never meant to chase blessings, you were meant to allow them.